Hi class, this is Professor Harmony Kim. In the continuation of last week, you will study the rest part of short-term memory or working memory, and today you will study long-term memory also. Let me briefly remind you working memory approach. Short-term memory can hold several interrelated information in our mind, working and using this information properly. Working memory is like a bench work. So material is constantly being handled, combined, and transformed. Allen Bradley developed a comprehensive theory in order to explore the characteristic of a working memory, which is named multiple component for working memory approach. So there are 4 components to make up working memory. They are Phonological Loop, Visuospatial Sketchpad, Episodic Buffer, and Central Executive. Last time you studied Phonological Loop. Phonological Loop processes a limited number of sounds for a short period of time. Phonological Loop maintains information by vocal or silently pronounced words, such as subvocalization. Subvocalization means you are hearing your inner voice when you say numbers silently. Also, there's acoustic confusion or acoustic mishearing errors. Reflect people are confusing similar sounding stimuli, such as C, T, D, G, V, B. These kind of letters make listener confused because they are similar sounding stimuli. However, different sounding letters such as C, W, Q, R, K, X, these different sounding letters make listeners to remember better because people recall more than items from the words sounded different than the words sounded similar. Now let's move to Visuospatial Sketchpad. So far, we studied the characteristic of a phonological loop. Now, let's move to Visuospatial Sketchpad. How this Visuospatial Sketchpad affect our short-term memory. So you can simply think that phonological loop is hearing. Visuospatial Sketchpad is seeing, S-E-E-I-N-G. Okay, so whenever you see something, you are exposed to get and hold visual information. Same thing, phonological loop. When you hear something, you are exposed to get and hold auditory information. So far we studied listening. Now let's move to seeing, S-E-E-I-N-G. Visuospatial Sketchpad processes both visual and spatial information. It is called Visuospatial Working Memory or short-term visual memory. Visuospatial Sketchpad stores visual appearance and relative position. It stores visual information encoded from verbal stimuli. For example, when your friend tells a story, you may find yourself visualizing the scene. So, Visuospatial Sketchpad permit people to hold and manipulate visual image. For example, mentally rearranging the furniture in your bedroom. Visuospatial Sketchpad stores a coherent picture of both the visual appearance of the object and relative position in a scene. So Visuospatial Sketchpad go with space together. Visuospatial Sketchpad had limited capacity because too many items enter your Visuospatial Sketchpad. So you cannot represent them accurately to recover them successfully. Just look around your place right now. Probably you will have a computer in front of you and you will have more items around the computer, and how much accurately you can retrieve all items. So Visuospatial Sketchpad has limited capacity. That means this Visuospatial Sketchpad can be interfered. How one visuospatial task can interfere with another. When you listen to a football game while you are driving, in order to understand the game, trying to form clear, detailed image of the scene and the action, in the meantime, your car began drifting out of its lane. You might have this kind of experience. So, when you listen to some sports game, you can imagine that scene in your brain. Then you lose concentration to looking at the present scene, such as in front of a car, the driving path. That will make your car drifting out of its lane. So it might be a better idea of switching the radio to music in order to drive safely, because music does not induce to generate a certain scene in your brain. Also, it is impossible to perform one task requiring a mental image at the same time that he performed a visuospatial task that required him to keep his car within specified boundary. Why? Because people have trouble performing two visuospatial tasks at the same time. So, one visuospatial task is looking at in front of your car, looking at the highway. But when you listen to sports game, your brain wanna form image of sports scene and the player's action. That will reduce the attention to see in front of a car. Therefore, your car drifts off the line. Why? Because people have trouble performing two visuospatial tasks at the same time. So it might be a better idea to listen to the music while you are driving rather than listen to the sports game. People use Visuospatial Sketchpad a lot. In other words, seeing, S-E-E-I-N-G, is more usable, more used than any other sensory task. Who use Visuospatial Sketchpad more often? Students or people in disciplines such as engineering, art, architecture. In that academic field, people use Visuospatial Sketchpad more than maybe psychology students. They retain image of a scene. Also, we use Visuospatial Sketchpad to find our way from one location to another, or tracking a moving object, or video game, jigsaw puzzle, and finding a way out of a maze. We use our Visuospatial Sketchpad in everyday life. This is the kind of working memory. Could you close eyes and retain a brief image of this room? You can represent it because Visuospatial Sketchpad allows you to store visual appearance of the object and their relative positions in the room. Can you recall which continent of world atlas on the wall? When too many items enter your Visuospatial Sketchpad, you cannot represent them accurately enough to recover them successfully. So, Visuospatial Sketchpad also has limit capacity. And depending on which academic field you belong to, some students in psychology and other social sciences use Phonological Loop more often than Visuospatial Sketchpad. When you study Buddhist meditation, the Buddhist practitioners use both Visuospatial Sketchpad and Phonological Loop to attain meditation practice successfully. You will study that later. There has been neuroscience research on the Visuospatial Sketchpad. So visual and spatial tasks activate several regions in the right hemisphere of the cortex. Also, Visuospatial Sketchpad activate the occipital region. You need to see first, right, for Visuospatial Sketchpad. Also, frontal cortex is activated too. Frontal and parietal lobes are activated, associated with attention. So, occipital lobe responsible for visual perception. The frontal and parietal lobes are activated upon visual and spatial tasks. Also, this right hemisphere of the cortex need to be activated for visual and spatial tasks. So here's this time, this is anterior frontal lobe, and this is posterior, back of your brain. So occipital lobe, back of your brain, and here's front area of your brain. So occipital lobe is responsible for visual perception, and frontal lobe and this parietal lobe are activated upon visual and spatial sketchpad. So far, you study Phonological Loop and Visuospatial Sketchpad. Let's move to Central Executive. Central Executive integrates information from the rest component, and its role is pay attention to or selecting strategies, transforming information, or coordinating behavior or switching between tasks. The characteristic of a central executive is planning and coordinating, but central executive cannot store information. It plays a critical role in the overall function of a working memory. It's like a CEO, Chief Executive Officer, or executive supervisor in organization. Therefore, central executive decide which topics deserve attention and which should be ignored. Central executives have a limited ability to perform simultaneous tasks. So you cannot operate central executive to several tasks at the same time. The central executive is important and complex, and it controls the deployment of attention. As I said, it works like CEO. CEO usually select strategies and decide how to tackle a problem, and CEO knows not to continue using ineffective strategy. So when you have a meeting with the CEO and then you submit some idea and then CEO listen and CEO decide, oh, that idea is good, we will go for that. Or that idea is not effective, throw away. So when you select something and when you decide something, you are using central executive from your working memory. Which part of the brain is related to the central executive? Both sides of the frontal region of the cortex are the most active portion of the brain when the central executive activities are engaged. Daydreaming. What's the meaning of daydreaming? Daydreaming is a series of pleasant thoughts that distract one's attention from the present. For example, you need to study, but whatever reason you feel bored, so you start to think of something. For example, travel to Hawaii and drinking cocktail and breathe fresh air and all these pleasant thoughts. When you engage in these pleasant thoughts, we describe that you are in daydreaming. Daydreaming requires the active participation of your central executive. Your central executive move your memory to engage in daydreaming and ignore the current present situation. Daydreaming occupied such a large portion of the resources of the central executive that they could not perform cognitive tasks successfully. So central executive is active when you plan the order of topics in your outline. Central executive guides you as you make decisions about your time frame for writing the paper. As I mentioned, both sides of the frontal region of the cortex are the most active portion of the brain when the central executive activities are engaged. Now, the last component of working memory, episodic buffer. Episodic buffer serve as a temporary storehouse that can hold and combine information from your phonological loop, Visuospatial Sketchpad, and even long-term memory. Since the central executive cannot store any information, episodic buffer is the component of working memory where auditory, visual, and spatial information could all be combined with the information from long-term memory. Episodic buffer implies that how working memory integrates information from different modalities such as vision, hearing, and space. Episodic buffer binds some concept that had not been previously connected. However, episodic buffer has limited capacity. So, episodic buffer refers to as a temporary, capacity-limited store that allows various components of a working memory to integrate information. It plays a role as an interface between working memory and long-term memory. Episodic buffer manipulates information so that you can interpret an earlier experience and you can solve new problems and you can plan future activities. So episodic buffer is just a temporary memory system. What is the relationship between working memory and academic performance? Individual has a different level of working memory. Performance on working memory task is related to academic achievement. Scores on working memory task also implies overall intelligence and school grades. Scores on working memory, especially the phonological loop, are correlated with reading ability. Scores on central executive tasks are correlated with verbal fluency, reading comprehension, reasoning ability, and note-taking skills. People with attention deficit disorder, abbreviation is ADHD, have more difficulty on what kind of component? Central executive task. Some people with major depression have difficulty with some working memory task. People with depression comment that they have trouble concentrating. And people with depression tend to have a ruminative style. They may worry about all the things that are wrong in their life. This kind of a tendency probably contribute to problems with working memory. So there's relationship between psychological depression and working memory. These findings emphasize the profound impact that depression has on the day-to-day cognitive activity of people who are suffering from depression. Let's move to long-term memory. Long-term memory means an unlimited capacity of storage for memory. Long-term memory can store information over a long period of time. How long? Arguably forever. That means when you forget, the memory does not allow you to retrieve, but that information is still there. But we cannot retrieve it. Long-term memory, depending on individual, some person has really high capacity to have a long-term memory so that they can even remember the previous life. Long-term memory system maintains information for extended period from several seconds to a lifetime, even to the previous life. Long-term memory is believed to have no limit on the amount of material it can store. For how long you can hold that information and under what circumstance information can later be retrieved from long-term memory depends on processing activities performed during encoding while information was in short-term memory. So short-term memory, you engage in some processing such as encoding, then this short-term memory transforms into long-term memory. There are several kinds of long-term memory. One is episodic memory, semantic memory, and procedural memory. Episodic memory allows you to remember a particular event or episode that happened to you personally. For example of episodic memory is recalling having breakfast this morning or recollecting your high school graduation ceremony, or what happened to your birthday party on your age 14. So episodic memory is more like a personal history. Semantic memory implies knowledge about language and the world. Semantic memory does not provide specific reference to a particular past episode. So, no reference to any particular episode in personal experience. For example, what is the capital city of USA? The capital city of USA is Washington, D.C., no matter what happened to you. So it's not a particular episode in your experience. The capital city of USA is always there. Procedural memory means memory for how to do things, such as riding a bike. Procedural memory does not produce a conscious experience of remembering. It is different from episodic memory. Also, procedural memory is difficult in verbalizing. So when I ask, could you remember how to drive? You know how to drive, but it is difficult to verbalize. Well, it's kind of complicated to verbalize. Therefore, procedural memory is different from semantic memory. These memories more operate unconsciously, habitually. Long-term memory can be recategorized into explicit memory and implicit memory. So semantic, episodic memory, they belong to explicit memory because they based on fact and event. Procedural memory is more implicit long-term memory. So your skills or habit, you just do. You do not know how you can do. In other words, it's difficult to describe and verbalize how you do by retrieving from long-term memory. So we will compare explicit and implicit memory a little bit later. I mentioned that short-term memory can transform into long-term memory by way of three aspects. One is encoding, second storage, and retrieve. So these encoding, storage, retrieve are three aspects of long-term memory. In other words, researchers were curious about how short-term memory can transform into long-term memory. First, encoding. Encoding is the process that controls the acquisition of information into memory. In other words, how you process and represent information from short-term to long-term memory. Second aspect of long-term memory is storage. Storage is the processes that determine how information is maintained over time. The third aspect is retrieve. Retrieve is the processes that control how information is recovered from memory and translated into performance. How is information pulled back out of memory? Let's look at encoding, the levels of a processing approach. Depth of a processing approach. Deeper level of processing produce better recall. A deeper level of processing means when you extract more meaning from a stimulus. how you can extract more meaning from a stimulus by analyzing for meaning, thinking of other association or image, or by past experience related to the stimulus. An encoding process that involves the formation of connections between to-be-remembered input and other information in previous memory. Two factors are involved in deep learning process. One is distinctiveness, second, elaboration. In other words, deep level processing encourages recall because of two factors. One is distinctiveness, the other one is elaboration. Distinctiveness refers to how unique or different a memory record is. Distinctiveness allows you to have a relatively easy to retrieve memory record. So distinctiveness or uniqueness enhance retention. For example, faces rated high in uniqueness relative to all the faces known to the subject were much better recognized than low unique. This is the example of distinctiveness. So once you look at this face, and next time when you look at this face, you can easily remember and retrieve them. Elaboration is another strategy for deep level processing of long-term memory. Elaboration is an encoding process that involves the formation of a connection between to-be-remembered input and other information in memory. Elaboration involves thinking about the meaning of information. Thinking about meaning rather than sound causes people to form more connection between presented event and other information in memory. For example, Geico. This is Geico commercial. Geico's choice of a gecko as a character for its insurance advertise is intended to make consumers think about the connection. Elaboration may explain why moderate levels of humor in an advertise enhance both encoding and retrieval of the product's claim. However, a strong humor inhibits elaboration of the claims. So, you should not make commercial too much excited. That rather inhibit elaboration of the claims.
For over 75 years, people have saved money with
Emotion, mood also influence memory. What is the difference between emotion and mood? Emotion is a reaction to a specific stimulus. Mood is a more general, long-lasting experience. So you may have a negative emotional reaction to the unpleasant fragrance you just smelled in a locker room, although you may be in a relatively positive mood today. So there's a difference time span between emotion and mood. Emotion and mood remember pleasant stimuli more accurately than other stimuli. Emotion and mood recall more accurately if mood matches the emotional nature of the material. So look at this table. The second column indicates when human contact what kind of stimulus. So this one, when people contact positive stimuli, when people contact negative stimuli, and neutral stimuli. And third column indicate remembering background. So when people has positive stimuli, then in that context, how much people can remember background. So when you look at this second row, when the stimuli is negative, people do not remember background very accurately. They can remember only 37%. But when they have positive stimuli, people can remember 44% of a background. Therefore, when people watch either non-violent or violent film, and they were asked to recall the two brand names appeared in the commercials, people significantly better recall for commercials that had appeared in the non-violent film. About 44% they can remember the commercial brand under positive stimuli. But people can only remember the brand from commercial 37% under the negative stimuli. So anger and violence reduce memory accuracy. Therefore, advertisers should be hesitant to sponsor violent TV program. You'd better not put your commercial right after negative stimuli. When you look at neutral stimuli, even neutral stimuli recall better memory compared to positive stimuli. So more accurate recall for neutral stimuli associated with pleasant stimuli. So when the central stimuli is boring, it's not very pleasant, it's not very negative, it's just boring neutral, then people remember the background more accurately than in other conditions. In Buddhism, when practitioners engage in meditation, they put more value on neutral feeling than positive or negative feeling. So people better recall for commercials that appears in the non-violent film, like for example, Bushman. Anger and violence reduce memory accuracy, for example, Karate Kid 3. So again, advertisers place their advertisement during non-violent programs so that they want viewers to remember their product's name as well as information about the product. One of Buddhist meditation named loving kindness meditation suggests the practitioner cultivate pleasant and neutral mood. Over time, unpleasant memories fade more than pleasant memories. People tend to rate unpleasant past events more positively with the passage of time, a phenomenon called positivity effect. What is mood congruence? If you are in pleasant mood, you should remember pleasant material better than unpleasant material. However, in an unpleasant mood, you can remember unpleasant material better. Let's look at this table. If you are not depressive tendency, you can remember 49% of a positive stimuli, and you can only remember 38% of negative stimuli. But if you are in depressive mood, you can remember negative stimuli more than positive stimuli. So, non-depressed people recall more positive than negative material. However, depression-prone people tend to recall more negative material. If depressed people tend to forget the positive experiences they have had, then their depression could increase still further. How can long-term memory be retrieved? Explicit memory, such as episodic memory and semantic memory, they are consciously aware remembering. So, explicit memory, deliberate use of memory with conscious awareness of remembering. Implicit memory, such as procedural memory, use of memory that occurs automatically and without conscious awareness of remembering. Both explicit and implicit memory are strongly influenced by retrieval cues in the environment. Let's look at explicit memory task. The common explicit memory test is recall. A recall task requires you to reproduce items that you learned earlier. Another explicit memory test is a recognition task. Recognition task means you must identify which items on a list had been presented at an earlier thing. Let me give you an example. Here's a list of words: picture, motion, village, window, number, horse, custom, amount, follow, advice, flower, kitchen. Now you read these list of words for a while and cover up the list and take a break for a few minutes and then try the task, such as write down the word on the white paper. That is the recall task. The other task, such as recognition, I might give another set of list of words, and another set of list of words include some of these words and new words combined. From that list, you will circle the word that appeared on the original list. That task is referred to as recognition task. So explicit memory tasks allow you to have recall and recognition. Implicit memory. You can assess your memory indirectly, unconsciously. Recent exposure to a word increase the likelihood that you will think of this particular word when you are given a cue that could evoke many different words. Another example is when you listen to a certain song in the morning while you are driving to go to work, you think that you just simply listen to that without your choice, but in the afternoon, you might unconsciously choose and sing that song in accordance to the implicit memory task. Here's example showing explicit versus implicit memory task. A young woman is walking aimlessly down the street, and she is eventually picked up by the police. She seems to be suffering from an extreme form of amnesia. You know the amnesia, who cannot remember, who lost the capacity of remembering. Because she has lost all memory of who she is. She cannot even remember her name, and she is carrying no identification card. Then the police has a breakthrough idea. They ask her to begin dialing phone numbers. As it turns out, she dials her mother's number, even though she is not aware whose number she is dialing. A woman with amnesia dialed a phone number that was a test of implicit memory. Implicit memory shows the effect of previous experience that creep out automatically when you are not making any conscious effort to remember the past. Dissociation illustrates a pattern between explicit and implicit memory. Adults often cannot remember stimuli when they are tested on an explicit memory task. As you see in the previous slide, this amnesia woman cannot commit any explicit memory task. However, they may remember the stimuli when tested on an implicit memory task. Depth of processing has a large positive effect on an explicit memory task, but has no effect on an implicit memory task. So a variable may have a large effect on an explicit task, but a small effect on an implicit memory. That's why driving a car cannot be learned by semantic encoding. Semantic encoding is explicit memory. But driving a car is procedural memory, which pertains to implicit memory. Therefore, people often know more than they can reveal in actual recall. We might not recognize how much we have implicit memory, but we have. And that implicit memory just come out depending on situation. Here's one more example to show implicit memory. Here's a story. Once upon a time, there was a centipede that was amazingly good at dancing with all 100 legs. All the creatures of the forest gathered to watch every time the centipede danced, and they were all duly impressed by the exquisite dance. But there was one creature that did not like watching the centipede dance. That was tortoise. Tortoise think that, how can I get the centipede to stop dancing? In this story, tortoise is represented as him or he, and centipede stands for her or she. So tortoise could not just say he did not like the dance. Neither could he say he danced better himself. That would obviously not true. So tortoise devised a fiendish plan. The tortoise sat down and wrote a letter to the centipede. "Oh, incomparable centipede, I am a devoted admirer of your exquisite dancing. I must know how you go about it when you dance. Is it that you lift your left leg number 28 and then your right leg number 39? Or do you begin by lifting your right leg number 17 before you lift your left leg, number 44? I await your answer in breathless anticipation. How do you think? How mean the tortoise is? So, when the centipede read the letter, she immediately began to think what she actually did when she danced. Which leg did she lift first? And which leg next? What do you think happened in the end of this story? The centipede never danced again. That's the way it goes when imagination gets strangled by reasoned deliberation. Thinking about which leg first and next, that is reasonable, logical approach. But imagination gets strangled by reasoned deliberation. Therefore, it is important for an artist to be able to just let go. The surrealists try to exploit this by putting themselves into a state where things just happened by themselves. They had a sheet of white paper in front of them and they began to write without thinking about what they write. They called it automatic writing. The expression originally comes from spiritualism, where a medium believed that a departed spirit was guiding the pen. In one sense, the surrealist artist is also a medium, that is to say, a means or a link. The surrealist is a medium of his own unconscious. So this unconscious domain is pretty large compared to conscious domain. We think that we can hold and we play under the conscious domain, but this unconscious domain really influences conscious realm. Everyone has different capacity of memory. People with anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorders means a generalized anxiety disorder. A generalized anxiety disorder experiences at least 6 months of intense, long-lasting anxiety and worry. People with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. These people keeps hold re-experiencing an extremely traumatic event, usually the soldier who had war experience, and once they come back to their home, they suffer from PTSD. Some people with social phobia who are being extremely anxious in social situation, even in under COVID-19 situation. People with this anxiety disorder remember threatening words more accurately compared to people without these disorders. So high anxious participants were less likely to remember the less disturbing word. So what kind of word some people use provides some information what kind of mental state this person resides in. So less anxious people are more likely to remember the less disturbing word. Even long-term memory can be lost. We call that amnesia. Forgetting that is caused by physical problems in the brain, such as a brain injury or some brain tumor or Alzheimer's. They are losing their long-term memory. There are two types of amnesia: retrograde amnesia, anterograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia means memory loss for events that happened before accident. So after accident, after injury, memory was normal for event. Anterograde amnesia is memory loss after the physical injury. And implicit memory is preserved in the anterograde amnesia. So people with amnesia shows different pattern of behavior depending on what kind of amnesia they belong to. We will study amnesia next time. And after study the rest part of a long-term memory, we will move to Buddhist meditation in the context of memory. The first quiz: neuroscientists who have examined the Visuospatial Sketchpad have discovered that what is the characteristic of a Visuospatial Sketchpad? You can find the answer in the previous slide. You have set aside 2 hours to study for the exam in this course, and you are currently deciding to review the new terms, writing down any terms that you cannot define. Which feature of Alan Baddeley's theory handled this planning activity? So you decide, right? When you decide, when you solve the problem, what kind of a component from working memory model you use. So this word can be the clue for the answer. If you are in a pleasant mood, you should remember pleasant material better than unpleasant material. Is this true or false? So, pleasant mood bring about another pleasant mood, and unpleasant mood maybe related to similar kinds of a mood. Also, you can find the answer from the lecture video. Again, routine process. You will send the answer of a 3 quiz question and include your email and send to my email in week 7 and your name, last name, comma, followed by first name, and write down answer of a 3 quiz question, and the due is this coming Sunday, 29th of August. This is the end of today's lecture. Thank you.